welcome to the Devonian. I'm your host, Acanthostega Gunnery. At the end of this period, trees are taking over, massive pillars of biomass creating enormous forests, the lungs of the earth. These lungs are inhaling and exhaling, which means that carbon and climate levels are whipping back and forth like a bucking bronco, tossing a bunch of unlucky animals off it in a second mass extinction. It's a bit more complicated than that, probably. We don't know too much about the causes of the Devonian extinction, other than that it lasted for a while, like a prolonged period of elevated extinction rather than a singular mass event. If you had to put a cause to it, we'll just say large-scale climate change. We know a bit more about its effects. So, how are everyone's favorite organisms? Who's alive and needs more names, and who's dead and needs to be mourned? And after that, who's new? As usual, shallow water environments were hit the hardest. The coral reefs crashed, and most of the dominant groups did too. The placoderms, a rising star, went extinct. The old ostracoderms also went extinct, as did any fishopods that weren't on land yet. Sea scorpions were shredded and sent spiraling on collision course with extinction. Though we do add temporarily Amniotes, the Soviet revenant. Even the trilobites felt this one. They're mostly running on fumes at this point, and as much as we love them, their Cambrian design is objectively outdated. Even still, they are chugging along somewhat with Paladin, the Paladin Amest, Archigonus, the Slender Amest, and Didymopugae, the Squat Amest. Finally, horseshoe crabs handled it remarkably well. Despite never being dominant, they persisted just fine well before we lived, and will likely stay the same long after we— Oh, come on! Euproops is the compound moon shield, and Anderella is the cradle moon shield. So, who else carries the flame? Well, the star of this period, at least in the Americas, was my old nemesis, the crinoids. They even brought a friend, the blastoids, which are like the urchin to their starfish. Ugh. Hopefully they die off soon. Actinocrinites is the solar eric, and Platycrinites is the flat eric. In the deep seas, sturdier designs withstood it. Sharks, both spiny and true, are kicking around. Ammonites are kind of everywhere, and although they got choked out in the shallow waters, deep water ammonites recovered. They head into this period strong with Goniatides, the reticulated ossuary, Glaphritides, the silver ossuary, and Gastrioceras, the bloated ossuary. And thirdly, a cousin to the insects is seizing a moment to explode out into the shallow waters. Now, you might consider it fallacious to say crustaceans are a cousin to the insects, but when most people hear crustaceans, they think Malacostracans, so it really doesn't give you too wrong of an idea. We already covered one relative of Malacostracans, who now include Convexicaris, the swollen jassic, and Concavicaris, the pleated jassic. On land, not too much has changed. Insects, spiders, and myriapods are making themselves at home in the new forests and are joined by tetrapods, who narrowly made it out of the sea in time, and also some snails and worms, but they don't fossilize very well. The tetrapods also split again because some of them figured out how to put water in their eggs. Surprisingly, this wasn't really a silver bullet right away. After all, in the Carboniferous, there were plenty of vernal pools, fresh water, and swamps to keep the amphibians strong, so let's start with them. Temnospondyli may not exactly be amphibians, but they were early non-amniotic vertebrates, which is good enough. Also, they're found worldwide, most notably in Europe as well, so we can give them an Indo-European name. I'm thinking something swamp-related. So swamp is a strange word etymologically. Bog is from Irish, and marsh originally meant mere-ish, but fen is from the original Proto-Indo-European root for a swamp. I think the most accurate noun-forming suffix is the best noun-forming suffix is sne for Proto-Indo-European bensne or benesne. Proto-Germanic finsno or finisno, Old English fisen or fis or fisen or finern or finis, into Modern English fies, fisen, fin, finner, finnern, or fins. Now, fins could be spelt either way. Typically, C is for Norman and S is for Old English, but compare rinse and mince. So, Balanerpeton is the wood fince, Amphibamus is the wandering fince, Dendropeton is the Acadian fince, and Phaladerpeton is the Yorkshire fince. Surprisingly, these weren't super exciting during the Carboniferous, but they'll really take off in the Permian and Triassic. Speaking of taking off, insects can fly now. As the name suggests, most of these are paleopterans, except for Paleodictyoptera, which are neopterans. This is a relatively simple bow plan. Actually, most bow plow are once you get down to it, but life is nicer when you segue. Head, thorax, wings that stick out because they can't be folded up, legs, long, thin, abdomen with little extra bits sticking out the back end, most closely resembling dragonflies or mayflies, because that is what they are, except the Paleodictyopterans, which also have an extra pair of kind of wings on their first thoracic Paleozoic segment. Also, they desperately need a new name. I can't keep calling them Paleodictyoptera. Now, between dragonflies and mayflies, I think it's likely that it ends in fly. Now, true flies haven't emerged yet, but the concept of flying isn't overwhelmingly unique. In fact, I've half a mind to call them flies, but that's boring and boring. Plus, a lot of other insects have weird names like Dobsonfly or caddisfly. Now, my first instinct is swamp fly, but everything can't just be swamps. So what did they do? Well, they have piercing, sucking mouthparts resembling a true buck, which they use to suck juices out of plants. They're sometimes associated with the earliest examples of pollination, feeding on reproductive organs of plants. Flower fly. Flowers won't be invented until the Cretaceous, which is 150 million years away. Cone fly. I don't know. I feel like a larger group is more likely to be named after what it looks like rather than what it does. So back to those extra fake wings. Boxfly feels like it could work. Maybe bracefly, which in addition to meaning a little support, historically meant arm. So Mazothyros is the common bracefly, Dilichala is the dragon bracefly, and Homoeoptera is the feathery bracefly. Mayflies seem to be only referred to by scientific names, except in fly fishing, where they're exclusively referred to by their coloration. So I guess Triplosoba is the lower murky dun. The poster child of this period was Meganeura, an enormous, not a dragonfly, a relative called the Griffinflies. Now, most dragonflies aren't actually called dragonfly in the name. Often they're named after their tails, wings, or some agent noun, which does take a bit of wind out of the sails. On the plus side, dragonflies dominated the best common name bracket, so I can name it something insanely hard like the Bloodweaver Marsh Fiend. Oh, you're trying too hard. That's just cringe. Yeah, the YouTube video about making up names for dinosaurs is cringe. Friggin' fork found in kitchen. At least I'm not a pedophile who touches little boys and girls. And Bohemiatopus is the Moravian swamp dragon. Now, why don't we head back into the ocean for a bit? Cichlids are flat, round, crab-looking things, not to be confused with cichlids, which are fish, and make it impossible to look up cichlids. Cichlids actually do have a rather restricted range, mostly found west of Pangaea in the tropics. Now, this is Panthalassa, but they are mostly restricted to the shallows, and also I haven't had the chance to do a Native American name in a while. The language I've selected is Cherokee, because it would be coastal, and also it had a lot of contact with European languages. So, the word for he is hiding, which is a concept I like to tie to shelled animals, is Atiskashaska. Cherokee is a tonal language, which is fun. I'm compacting this to Discalce. Now, the D isn't actually voiced, it's like Mandarin or almost Welsh, where they write out the aspiration like this. However, due to analogy with disc, I prefer this over Tiscalce. This could be further shortened to just scalce, like possum from opossum, or a word I'm not allowed to say from raccoon, but officially, Americlus is the Kentucky Discalce, and Britannicus is the common Discalce. Now, what the heck is this thing? This is Tully Monstrum, aka the Tully Monster. What is it? Who can say? It's probably a vertebrate, maybe, but it might be a squid, and its brain is weird, and so are its fins, and it has a weird jaw and weird melanosomes, and nobody knows what to do with it. It was a soft-bodied thing from Illinois. I've selected Miami, Illinois as the language, spoken in Illinois, which is where the Tully Monster is from. Now, in these reconstructions, it's very barrel-shaped and soft. I don't think it's insane to connect it to pigs, which is my instinct. Plus, pigs show up in a lot of other animals' names for no reason. Of course, they don't have pigs in pre-Columbian North America, but it's important to show you all my thought process. Maybe something else fatty, like a stomach or breast, but that seems unlikely in a language with unalienable possession. Now, there is another kind of hog, but that's also a body part. Why would that one be fine when the others aren't? I settled on bladder, which, yes, is also a body part, but not usually a human body part. The Miami word for its bladder is apiquae, something like French apiquae, English apiquae. Tully Monstrum gregarium is the rainbow apiquae. It should be relatively colorful because we think it had special melanin cells. Anyway, I have already done early myriapods, the sumites, but by now they've changed a lot and don't need to go to the ocean to reproduce. So the name is inaccurate and it doesn't befit a king like Arthropleura. So let's rerun that territory. I've hardly got anything better to do. Plus, there are a lot of groups where every animal shares a name, and then there's just some guy. So we need to give it a Proto-Indo-European name. They are called the cows of the Carboniferous, massive detritivores that feed on detritus. Does this script feel especially recursive? I feel like I have nothing good to say about anything. Basically, we're talking about clearing away ground, so something like the clearer or the opener. Is that fine with you, or do you need me to sign a permit first? I hate all of you. What options are there for roots? Well, ho, but that also means to uproot or tear apart. It gives English rot and to rid. The root for to clean, tidy, purify is cho. It gives English cloaca and lutter. Now, my first instinct is Proto-Indo-European kluhnos, Proto-Germanic klunas, Old English klun, English clown. But I will endeavor for something more dignified, and also Grimm's Law, so this wouldn't even be accurate. Plus, I want a neuter noun. So we'll be using ter or otr or tr, which are probably related, vary in ablaut and gender, and end up mostly the same in Proto-Germanic. Proto-Indo-European kluter, Proto-Germanic kluder, Old English kluder, Swedish klur. No, that's not what we're doing in this video. English louder. Alternatively, the oblique version of this is Proto-Germanic hludrir, which is umlauter to Old English hydra, English lighter. Also, in theory, it should be lither or lither, compare father, but it just feels different if there's a long vowel. I could be persuaded to litherworm, considering sumite has an ending word. Notably, this would almost certainly be influenced by the lindworm to English litheworm, or otherwise something relating to lintar, which was used on and off as a synonym for snake. So Arthropleura is the giant lither. Okay, next up, I'm rolling with my boy, Westlothania. So lizards, at least the ones that aren't just called lizards, tend to have weird etymologies. Chameleon is Greek, potentially Akkadian via Greek, and so is skink. Salamander is some Iranian language via Greek. Disclaimer, salamanders are not actually lizards, but neither is Westlothiana. Python, dragon, basilisk, yeah, all Greek. Adder, monitor, and snake are the only three native to English. Tuatara, agama, iguana, anaconda, and mamba are all loaned from various tropical languages. Disclaimer, New Zealand and South Africa are not in the tropics. And crate, taipan, anole, gecko, and lizard itself are all unknown. So the earliest amniotes will be Greek, ultimately from, I don't know, somewhere in West Asia. Let's go Sanskrit. Now, notably about these guys, they don't live in water anymore. They hunt in dry ground. They nest in trees if they want to. So I will call them wooden fish or something. I don't really care about what they are. It's perfectly within reason for the noun to get clipped and only the participle survive. So the word for fish is masculine, so we get kastamaya, ancient Greek kastame, presumably via some Iranian source. Latin kastama, French chastem, English chastame. Hylonomous is the scarlet chastame. Paleothyrus is the emerald chastame. Petrolachosaurus is the lagoon chastame. And Westlothiana is the lesser chastame. Again, it's not actually an amniote. And that leaves room for some odds and ends from groups that don't really need a whole new name. Pulmonoscorpius is clearly just a scorpion. I mean, it's big. It's the Scottish giant scorpion, but it's not getting a whole new name. Similarly, Trigonotarbus is clearly a tick. I mean, I don't know if that's a tick, but it sure looks like one, so I'm calling it the giant ground tick. Xenacanths are freshwater sharks with a spike. Unicorn shark seems a bit direct, and I don't love the mouthfeel of needle shark, so I'm using the needle to sew and making Xenacanthus the Mississippi thread shark. Triodis is the razor thread shark, and Orthocanthus is the Louisiana thread shark. All right. Bye. See you in the next period, which won't be for a few weeks. And don't forget, I'm with you in the dark.